Deep Rock Galactic has a lot of overclocks, and they all change the gun in unique ways. I'm not going to tell you what is and isn't powerful, that's for you to decide. I'm here to tell you how each overclock plays and what kind of playstyle they're intended for, one weapon pair at a time. This episode, Driller is on the testing grounds and equipped with his signature Flamethrower and Subata. First up, Scorching Tide. This one gives you a charge attack that eats 25 fuel in exchange for a powerful spread of flame with significant range. Its label isn't unstable, but it's basically a clean. It doesn't harm the gun at all. The flame burst is great for junking Praetorians and other tough enemies at point blank, but past that, it only becomes reliable for taking out waves of grunts. And this is less of a complaint about the overclock, but the flame spread is a bit difficult to aim properly because it has almost no verticality to it. That's just me though, and I bet if I had more practice with it, I'd be as skilled at lining up Scorching Tides as I am with lining up HE grenades. The huge ammo consumption means it's not practical to use against light crowds, but against dense hordes, it's pretty ammo efficient, and it's really good at knocking most of the health off of Praetorians, which previously would give Driller a lot of trouble. Up next, we have Fuel Stream Diffuser. This knocks off 20% of your fire rate in exchange for a longer flame reach. This is good for taking care of enemies before they get all up in your face, as well as painting sticky flames from a larger distance. Now's a good time as any to mention that fire rate doesn't affect the rate at which you apply sticky flames or proc the upgrade heat radiance, meaning this could also be a decent pick for a sticky flames enjoyer who doesn't like the more sticky flames heavy overclocks. The lowered fire rate isn't all that noticeable against smaller enemies, but you may experience some difficulties with tougher ones. Overall, it's a lightly impactful range extender that's good for drillers who don't like to risk being in the faces of all the enemies. And now we talk about sticky fuel. This is another oft talked about overclock, and it's pretty easy to see why. It gives the sticky flames a heavy boost in exchange for lowered ammo and mag size. The penalties aren't too harsh on their own, but both together, combined with the rather long reload of the flamethrower, means you'll really need to position well and use that ammo effectively to properly fence off enemies. If you get overwhelmed, it's unlikely you'll have your fuel in the mag to blast through, meaning you'll be stuck repositioning while you reload. If you have good awareness of where the enemies are coming from before they get to you, it's extremely good, but it makes the weapon more cumbersome overall while leaving you with nothing if the enemies end up sneaking up on you. Right next to sticky fuel in the overclock list is sticky additive. This clean gives a small boost to sticky flame lifetime and direct damage. This is a nice clean to have that gives appreciable bonuses to both playstyles for those who don't want to have to choose between them. Compact feed valves is a bit of an interesting one. It decreases your range and increases your reload time in exchange for a hefty ammo and mag size increase. The extra ammo is very noticeable and makes it very easy to lean heavily on the flamethrower without running out of ammo, but the slower reload speed compounding on the already slow reload of the flamethrower means you'll have to reload proactively a lot, especially with the large tank size that may leave you losing track of how much is left in your mag. The decreased range makes it a little more difficult to use, but you could always swap the tier 1 mag size upgrade for the reach upgrade like I did and make up for that disadvantage. Although I'm sure it would be perfectly usable without, especially if your build is spec'd more heavily into direct damage. Face Melter is another overclock you hear a lot about. It gives a substantial increase to fire rate and damage in exchange for a mag size penalty and reduced reach. This is the definitive no sticky flames overclock, massively boosting the rate at which you kill enemies and set them on fire. It's great for direct damage, but the massive boost to fire rate means it's inefficient to apply sticky flames or use heat radiance except as part of shooting at something. Other than that, the reduction in tank size means you'll be reloading fairly frequently, but while you're firing, everything in front of you just melts. Side note, I did deliberately not take the reach upgrade this time to demonstrate, like with compact feed valves, which gives a similar reach penalty, that it's still usable without. Moving right along from one of the more transformative overclocks to one of the more boring cleans. Lighter tanks just gives you some more ammo. That's it. That's not to say it's bad, it's great for people who think the flamethrower already does enough damage and just want to be able to use it more. The ammo boost is comparable to compact feed valves, and while it doesn't have the mag size bonus, it doesn't have the minor penalties either. Now onto the Subata, Driller's trusty secondary. For the duration of the flamethrower testing, I was using Chain Hit, a clean overclock that gives a 75% chance for a weak point hit to ricochet to a nearby enemy. Similar to AI Stability Engine, this is a great overclock if you can reliably hit weak points. The ricochet does full damage, and it's great for keeping your flank covered while you dump bullets into a tougher target, or for just paring down small crowds that aren't worth using your primary on. Being a clean, it also doesn't harm the gun any, but if you aren't the type to hit weak points often, you might still want to try a different overclock. Auto fire is an unstable that behaves similarly to the GK2's overclocked firing mechanism. More fire rate, more recoil. This one also gives you full auto though. I deliberately chose not to take the recoil reduction upgrade once again to prove the gun was usable without it. Usable is a technicality here, it's still serviceable, but it's significantly harder to hit things at medium and long ranges. It also has the same shortcoming of being hard to tap fire, but if you exclusively use the Subata to melt Praetorians and oppressors at close range, this is your overclock. Speaking of GK2-like overclocks, Homebrew Powder. This is a carbon copy of the overclock of the same name for the GK2, so rather than repeat myself, I think I'll just use this segment to address a few issues in the last video. First, the average damage boost from the overclock is 10%, not 20%. I'm sorry about that. For some reason I had it in my head that it was 20%, but it absolutely is not. My bad. Second, you can negate the fact that the GK2 can't one-shot swarmers with the damage upgrade. I'll try to be more thorough with those kinds of claims in future videos. With that being said, this version of Homebrew Powder can't ever one-shot swarmers on a low roll, even with both damage upgrades, but given that you're playing Driller, that's not a huge concern. Now, Tranquilizer Rounds is a fairly interesting overclock. It gives a substantial stun chance in exchange for a fire rate and mag size penalty. It's great for locking down annoying targets like Mactera and Spitters while you focus on more pressing threats, and it doesn't hurt the gun's damage at all, apart from the loss of the 4 bullets. It's not as good at locking down tougher targets, but it's still good enough. A few things to note. First, it's not a guaranteed stun. Even if it were, some enemies have stun resist. Some enemies like Praetorians are immune to stun for a second or two after recovering from being stunned, so also keep that in mind. I also took the blow-through upgrade on this run to see if I had stunned multiple targets at once, but my results were inconclusive. It probably won't matter much in the long run though. Overstuffed Magazine gives a larger mag size and a longer reload. It's nice for bursting down Praetorians because you can do it all in one mag with the right upgrades without having to reload. Overall, it doesn't hurt the gun much and makes it more reliable in situations where you're trying to take care of a troublesome ranged enemy, as you're less likely to run out of bullets in the mag before they run out of health. It does make the gun a little more cumbersome, so you'll be relying on your primary to clean up surprise waves a lot more. Explosive reload is a very interesting one. You get a big burst of damage on targets you've shot when you reload, but you lose half your ammo and half your mag size for it. The damage is very good, it's more than the damage of the bullet, and unlike electrifying reload, it does stack fully with multiple shots, but overall it's very difficult to use effectively. You have to ration your shots well and understand the breakpoints of enemies very well. You do get an indicator of when reloading will kill an enemy, but that can be difficult to juggle in a swarm. This is definitely a high skill floor overclock with high rewards, especially in a team game where multiple sources of damage are incoming at once. It is good for tougher targets though, as it does a lot of damage. And that's every overclock for the Flamethrower and the Subata. Some are fun, some are not my style, but none of them are particularly good or bad. Stay tuned for the next episode of this, where we're going to start off with Engineer, and brace yourself for more, because we're not even a third of the way done yet. Who think the Flamethrower does enough damage already and just want to be able to use it more. It has an appreciable damage boost. You gotta love your damage boosts.